right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to a special called session of the Athens-Clarke County Mayor and Commission that will be immediately followed by our regularly scheduled agenda-setting session. It is Tuesday, August 16th, 2022, and I'd like to begin by asking Clerk Spratlin to call roll for us.
Davenport.
Here.
Parker.
Here.
Lane.
Here.
Wright.
Present.
Benson.
Here.
Poole.
Here.
Edwards.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Thornton.
Here.
Hamby.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Oh, thank you, Madam Clerk. Full house tonight. Good to see everyone. All right, we have a single item tonight, which is to consider an updated memorandum of understanding between the Food Bank of Northeast Georgia and the Athens-Clarke County Unified Government. And first order of business is always to ask if we have any resident input. Resident input will also be accepted later in the meeting. And in cases both of this session and our agenda setting meeting, anyone with input will have 3 minutes, and there's a light on Clerk Spratlin's desk. It will turn green when it is time to speak, yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and red when your time has expired. So would anyone like to speak to this single item on our special called session tonight? All right. Seeing none, we'll come behind the rail for discussion. Manager Williams, any introduction to this item?
Thank you, Mayor. This is primarily compliance action that the Department of Community Affairs has asked for an amended language access plan. It's also necessary to go ahead and allow the purchase of the property intended for the ultimate development to occur. The closing is next week. And so I appreciate you entertaining the special called session to allow that timing to occur. There are continued discussions about shared risk of the project. We all have the same intent in mind to successfully build as much building as we can with the funds available, and we'll continue to work through that. So there are some amendments to the MOU that we still are having continued conversations with. In the interest of purchasing the property, I would recommend you go ahead and move this forward. We'll continue to have conversations and to try and find that good balance of risk associated with the project.
Thank you, Manager Williams. Would anyone like to introduce a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, I've got I think we do need
So moved to
need a
motion to suspend the rules.
motion for suspension of rules.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Denson. All in favor of suspension of rules, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, now back to the substance.
So, I move.
Second.
All right, motion from Commissioner Thornton, second from Commissioner Hamby. Manager Williams?
Well, just because of the volatility of the construction market, it's quite possible we'll be before you in the next couple of months, yet again with an amended MOU to try and true it up after the design's complete and we understand what the construction costs are. So don't want you to think we're being inefficient. It's just, we're learning as we move through this project, and we'll continue to try and address concerns of our partner.
All right, Commissioner Thornton, did you want to provide some input?
Manager Williams, the only thing, I know you say you're working through this process. Is there anything in here that jumps out at you that you could tell us specific? And if not, that's fine, but is there anything that jumps out of you in these changes that you could share with us?
No, the changes that are before you tonight, and I won't speak for Attorney Drake, but these are the changes I would recommend. In all fairness to our partner, there were some concerns that the language might allow them to absorb some costs that they didn't have approval over. And our insistence on the language that is there currently is that, this is the food bank project, and we really weren't supposed to incur costs associated with this. We're trying to be a good partner and be a conduit for considerable federal funds. I mean, it's $9 million is nothing to scoff at. We have incurred some costs along the way. It was not planned. DCA came forward and introduced the concept that the JDA would have to be the holder of the property for at least 5 years, and that required an intergovernmental agreement with the JDA. And that was an unplanned expense, and for the government's part, we did absorb that. But we want to limit that exposure, and we, again, are not a party to the construction contract. I know there was some concern on the food bank's part that some construction costs could get added that they didn't approve. So this is what happens when you get into a complicated construction project with two parties. Of course, the government's on the hook for all the risk associated with the grant. If things don't work out, we got to repay the grant. And of course, the food bank, they've got limited resources like everybody, and they're wanting to preserve their ability to approve all expenses, and that's just kind of where we are. And we're going to continue to work through that, and it could be, I want to appreciate Assistant Manager Jones's efforts at trying to find some common ground, which could be that we just limit our exposure at a certain point, but we're going to talk about that further with the food bank. But Attorney Drake, I'm comfortable with the language that the commission's voting on tonight.
Yes, I'm comfortable with it. I know that, as you expressed right now, the food bank is not completely comfortable with it, so we're still working through that as far as the language of the MOU. And so,
And how much did we absorb? Or did I miss that somewhere?
At this point,
Approximately.
about $30,000.
Okay.
Commissioner Hamby?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. So the statement you made that this will be back before us to face some unintended consequences, does that mean you're going to come back before us to ask for some more money?
Okay, well, thank you for asking that. What I anticipate, there is an estimated budget right now in the MOU before you of $12 million, which is tied to a certain square footage of the building. And so we're gonna vet that. As you remember, in the MOU, there's a owner's rep, another construction professional besides the architect. It's a credible architect, but what we found is usually the case is that, the architect and contractor's numbers are two different things, right? So we've asked to help hedge our risk of having to repay the grant, that there be an owner's rep. The food bank did agree to pay for that. So Commissioner Hamby, to answer your question, it could be that we're back to you in a couple of months once we've worked out the budget and the scope. Because if you'll notice in this version, the original MOU, I think the building was estimated to be about 100,000 square feet. In this version, it's more like 63,000 square feet. So as we kind of go down the funnel of definition, we may come back to you to clarify that.
Okay.
Move from Volkswagen van to Volkswagen Beetle.
Yeah, I guess I would say this, and I look forward to that conversation, but I hope in the interim of that conversation, and you see some trends where it's going to cost more or more dollars are going to be asked of us. This is the food bank of Northeast Georgia, and I noticed in the memo that was sent to us that I think Jackson County's contributed 100,000 or some other, I think it was Jackson County, but I'd like to see some effort and questions asked of Northeast Georgia to contribute as well.
Yes, and I would say that that's been our consistent position, is that we don't want to absorb costs. We heard you when you said that. We've relayed that to our partner. I will remind you that I think there was a recent request on behalf of the food bank to access another $350,000 of ARPA funds, so that's out there to be discussed. But at this point, I will say that the language in this version of the MOU does give the government the right to reduce the scope if it doesn't seem like we can afford it, just to make sure that the project can be built. Now, of course, the food bank can weigh in on that too and decide whether or not they want to go that route. So you see that's just an example of the shared risk that's there. We're trying to navigate together. But I hear what you're saying, Commissioner Hamby.
Any further input? I've got a motion from Commissioner Thornton and a second from Commissioner Hamby. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries. All right, with no other items needed to be considered under suspension of rules, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn the special called session.
So moved. Second.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Link and a second from Commissioner Parker. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, hearing none, special called session is adjourned, and we will move into our agenda setting session. And the same rules of public input apply to the agenda setting session as apply to the special called session. And we'll have several opportunities for public input. We're going to have an opportunity on the consent agenda. We are then going to have an opportunity on old and new business, and then we'll have individual opportunities on each of the planning and zoning items. So the consent agenda are items 1 through 8. And before I turn to public input, would any member of the commission like to remove an item from the consent agenda?
Item 1, just for some clarification.
All right. Would anyone else like to remove an item from consent?
Item 6 for a clarifying question also.
All right. All right. So currently then, we have items 2 through 5 and 7 and 8 that remain on the consent agenda. Would any member of the public like to speak to any of those items, 2 through 5 or 7 or 8? All right, seeing none, we're going to move to discussion items. So discussion items are 1, 6, 11 through 20, and 25. 1, 6, 11 through 20, and 25. Would any member of the public like to speak to any of these items? It's a quiet August. Everybody's enjoying the lull before students start back this week. All right, we're going to go ahead and move to the first item of the discussion, which Commissioner Denson would like to see discussed. Go right ahead, Commissioner Denson.
Thank you, Mayor. And really, I was just going to ask for the attorney if we could just get a breakdown of what the amendments are and why they're necessary.
So this relates to the formation of the Tax Allocation District Advisory Committees to allow for up to 7 committee members, staggered membership terms, and a secretary role for each TAD advisory committee. I think what we learned when we set these up was that we didn't really get into this specifically how many members were going to be on each one, and more than that got appointed to some. And as we started working through it, Ilka and staff decided we needed more definition to these bodies, and so that's what it's attempting to do.
Okay, just to get some consistency
Yes,
with
consistency.
Okay. Okay.
Staggered terms and
Oh, yeah,
comparable
and staggered
size.
terms, we've learned that's a problem when everybody,
Right.
when that's not put in there because everybody goes off at one time, and it's
Okay.
better to have some continuity.
Okay.
And if I could, Mayor, offer that, that was a lot to do all at once with the 6 redevelopment plans and the governance structures, and we were trying to work through some different ideas, and so this is a little bit of cleanup there to make them run. Now that we've got them going and looking at them, that's what it's meant to do.
And we just didn't think of all this as we were moving so quickly to get
Sure.
those TADs set up.
Yeah, and that's what I figured. I just kind of wanted to, I read through a little bit, so I just want to make sure I comprehended it all, and I'm fine with this being put back on consent.
Commissioner Thornton?
This is indirectly related. I do know you're looking at the North Athens TAD now. So after that TAD, I'm excited about, gets approved, have all the TADs been,
Staffed with the residents.
Uh-huh.
So I need to put together the North Avenue one and then the West Broad Hawthorne one. And in fact, I'm glad you raised the question because I will be giving you a call, Commissioner, for some guidance. So be anticipating that.
So said another way, 4 of 6 have been put together.
That's correct. Commissioner Houle?
Just to clarify, and this only applies to the advisory committees, it doesn't apply to the redevelopment committee that's been created for the Maltad?
Correct. All right, so everybody find this back on consent? All right, so we're going to move on to item 6, which is the Byrne grant for some sort of protective shielding and other items. Commissioner Houle?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to confirm if the money, if awarded, must be used for the 2 listed purposes, or if it can be reappropriated after it's awarded.
Well, the application, it will be, if approved, would be for these specific things. I'd have to ask if they would allow us to amend it or change it after the award, but that would be up to the granting agency.
Okay. And, I asked just because we've had different discussions around different things to purchase, and these things make total sense to me, and I'm happy to keep them on consent, assuming the answer is that the money would stay going specifically to that. Whereas
I
there's other
see your
things kind of
question.
listed in the facts and issues that
I thought,
might be less uniformly supported
yeah,
from past awards of
I hear
of
you.
similar grants.
Okay, I was looking at it from the other way. I thought you might want to change it after the fact, but you want to make sure it
I
doesn't
want to
get
make sure it
changed.
doesn't change after the fact. is
I
my
can
question.
assure you that if you approve this, then that's what it's going to be for.
Okay, thanks. I'm happy with it staying on consent.
Any further input on 6? All right, 6 is back on consent. We are winning tonight, my friends. All right, we have a couple items of old business. Number 9 is kind of one of 2 rezonings. Commissioner Parker, any update on Olympic Drive?
Yeah, so have been facilitating conversations between Mill Creek Residential and the East Athens Development Corporation, largely to the end that I discussed at our previous meeting, both our last voting session where we tabled this, and I believe at agenda setting as well. I also had a meeting with the attorney's office on Friday to sort of figure out how the local government could also facilitate that agreement. And for reminder, this was structured based upon our inclusionary zoning program, particularly the payment in lieu option, whereby a developer can donate to an affordable housing fund rather than build affordable housing on site. There may be some legal concerns with pursuing that strategy, particularly because the area that is currently zoned industrial and is being sought for planned development here is not in the commercial downtown zone, which is the only area where we currently allow payment in lieu. And so we are trying to consider a different way forward. And I would also love for us to reconsider that portion of the inclusionary zoning ordinance, given that we may be missing out on opportunities like these to substantially invest in housing and in single-family neighborhoods where multifamily strategies are not ideal. So we'll see what happens effectively between now and the voting meeting, but that is where that is at currently.
Thanks, Commissioner. I appreciate the update. Commissioner Thorne?
Commissioner Park, could you say that again? I might have missed. What is the barrier you're kind of coming to with the community benefit part?
Yeah, so the proposal that was brought forward to us was based on our inclusionary zoning ordinance, but we ran into an issue in that it does not adhere to it exactly, in that this area is not permitted to do payment in lieu of taxes, or in lieu of affordable housing on site, because it is not in the commercial downtown zone.
So then, what you have been working on has been targeted for the downtown district?
So, yeah, under the current, in our current inclusionary zoning ordinance, the only place where you can make a payment to the Affordable Housing Fund instead of building on-site is commercial downtown, just downtown. And so everywhere else that we have encouraged inclusionary zoning to take place, you can only build on-site. There are some reasons why building on-site at this particular development is not incredibly attractive. Y'all raised a lot of issues about inaccessibility of transit and things of that nature. And so I think that's why that proposal had been brought forward, and why I think it would have been very, it could be a really innovative way to have more community control over how housing gets built. If instead of developer building it, we are able to allow a more democratic process for deciding how it's invested. So I think to answer your question, I went on a slight tangent there. But essentially, there's very specific areas where you can do a payment in lieu, and this is not one of them. And most places are not included in that. So.
And I guess that was the question, where I was heading to. I guess I just haven't followed it in so much detail, because of course, you know, I'm always pitching for North Athens, so I just wasn't aware of that, but thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Commissioner Denson?
Yeah, I guess on that, and definitely having to think back to everything we did in the meetings, and I might ask Assistant Manager Jones or the attorney for some clarification, but I think, couldn't we still move forward with the plan, like if that was the idea, just we would have to vote? I mean, because that inclusionary zoning policy is so that it can be done by right out, and you can only by right do it within commercial downtown, but we could still make a negotiation where we take a payment in lieu. This body could decide that.
Well, as I expressed in the last meeting, you know, we have some concerns that there's a concept in Georgia law called illegal contract zoning or illegal conditional zoning. So in a sense, when you go to a developer and say, if you'll do this, we'll do this, some people call that quid pro quo.
Yeah.
And so we think that's problematic from a legal perspective in this. If the developer had approached us, with the agreement in hand like has happened before, we think that's a lot different. But here, there's a concept in law also called, when you ask a developer to pay something like that, it's called an unconstitutional exaction. And so that's our concerns. Also, we think that, once we do set this program up for the payment in lieu, that it would be best if we either work through someone like the Housing Authority, who's a governmental authority that we don't have to worry about doing a procurement process, but rather than just select one entity. This is not like the ARPA funds where you can do that. Here, we would recommend following some process where everyone's allowed the opportunity to present a proposal to be the facilitator or the user of those funds, rather than just this. So those are our concerns here. And I strongly feel like the commission needs to proceed with caution in this area.
But those first few concerns around the potential looking at like a quid pro quo, that doesn't exist if we're doing it within the inclusionary zoning policy,
Exactly,
because
and
it's a structured
that's the whole
policy.
thing, I've been
Yeah.
saying to them, trying to get the body to move toward is let's put some by right things, let's have some processes.
Right.
And so the problem here is, so they could build out there, they could provide affordable housing in exchange for extra density out there, that's allowed. But as she said, as Commissioner said, that's not,
Laid out in code
because
currently.
of the transit and other issues, but that's not allowed out there. I mean, that's allowed, but not the payment in lieu of taxes
Right.
program.
Right.
Commissioner Hamby and then Hool.
Sure. And to your point, Commissioner Parker and Commissioner Denson, it seems, and Attorney Judd, you might can weigh in on this, but, once these things are built, we can determine how those property tax dollars get spent. It'd be nice if we come up with some sort of structure, like if you're not in an inclusionary zone, say for instance, if you're in this piece of property or a piece of property that's not in one of the TADs that gets built like this, could it be upon us to have whatever property taxes that piece of property generates after it's built to go into the affordable housing fund? And you see where I'm going with that? So
Sort of like a
that's on
tad, if
us.
I may,
That
sort
makes
of
it
like
on
a
us.
tad, but not. But like based on the same idea.
Right.
Yeah.
They're not paying any extra, but they will be
Yeah.
paying, it's like a TAD, but it's not.
And ultimately, that would really be part of our general fund budget discussion
be,
on an annual
yeah.
basis.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with the mayor. I think rather than trying to come up with some formal structure for that would just be the commission's prerogative at each budgetary. If you wanted to kind of take a look at what the annual taxes are and say, well, we're going to appropriate that, that'd be the easiest and assuredly legal way to do that, as opposed to trying to create a new, because there has been the question about additional TADs, and we're looking at the extra digest capacity if they're, that may not be possible. But you can do what you're saying, yes, sir.
Commissioner Hool?
Yeah, in addition to just kind of scrutinizing the budget maybe next time around, there is also the special districts that were brought up with the Classic Center proposal that we didn't pursue, but that's another mechanism that we haven't yet. I did have a question for you, Attorney Drake. You said if the developer had come to us, that would be different. And so do you mean like if they had included in their initial application to the planning department, or do you mean
the Lexington Road, for example, in the developer's initial application to the planning department, they offered to do affordable housing. I think that's much different than they don't get approved at the planning commission, and then we go to them and say, I think that can be very problematic. And in fact, so much so that, we have I plan on writing them, we have some planning commissioners now that I want to educate on this who are new and are learning, and, there's this concept of community benefits agreements, but there's a limit to how that can work, in the context of zoning. And,
Which
when
is
you
why
do
it's-
that in context of TADs, I think it's different, but, zoning relates, so this is really cutting edge stuff in Georgia. There's a few communities, but I think, again, when you go to a developer and say, if you will do this, we'll approve this, I think that can be very problematic, and then it gets down to, well, did that really happen? But I'm not saying it did, I'm just saying, I think it's better if you have we're working there, and we had this inclusionary zone, there was a committee that met a lot of times and came up with it, it just, unfortunately, doesn't have this in there, and and maybe that's something to go back and look at. There were a lot of policy reasons. I can remember the discussion about why it wasn't done. So it wasn't just done in a vacuum. This wasn't just, I don't think, but yeah, I think that's,
It's fair to say that universally, really what we want is some entry point that everybody can approach from the outset, rather than having some latter stage negotiation, but instead say, here is the way that,
yeah, and I'm actually going to be
any
writing,
developer can approach.
writing a memo for
Planning Commission.
for you, the members of the commission, and the planning commission members, because this issue's also come up with some of our new planning commission members, and hopefully we can get out in the next week or so. We're all learning and trying to make sure we make prudent decisions, and seeing other things that have happened in some other communities from a legal perspective that give us pause to say, all right, let's make sure we're in good shape. So, but you'll get more of that information.
And so I guess I'm just trying to, there's maybe like a two-parter here to walk away mulling over, which is what can someone do with what we've currently got on the books in the future if some developer happens to want to dig into our meetings and figure out what to do. And that would be, your initial application, like what we saw on Lexington Road, would have to include some kind of proposal
Feel much better with that.
pitches, what we would call
I feel much better though with let's get moving, continue to explore our inclusionary zoning to make sure that anything we're doing is something that we know that the guidelines are there and we're not working on an ad hoc basis.
And
I
then-
really think that's the direction this commission, because I think again, we put ourselves in the best position when that's the case.
That makes
We're
a
not
lot of-
negotiating with each developer for projects.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And so then the last thought here is, because we only have this mechanism in our ordinance applying to commercial downtown, does this warrant perhaps some kind of modification to the ordinance to suggest, like, if one wants to pursue a pilot outside of a commercial downtown district, then that needs to be included? Should that be captured somewhere so that's clear?
Certainly, that's the discretion of the commission to consider that amendment. I don't, what the policy reasons were.
And ultimately,
I know
my
it was
anticipation
discussed.
is that probably after a couple of years of inclusionary zoning implementation, we're going to recognize a handful of these things that we want to go back and true up. It's been even suggested that the specific dollar amount attached to the downtown payment in lieu of placement of affordable units on the ground might be something to be revisited. So I think there are going to be a handful of these things. It's nature of anything that's new and innovative is that you're going to have to come back to the table.
Yeah, because I guess what I'm hearing from Commissioner Denson is the rationale, and this is what I've heard from other members of the task force, for not having it apply elsewhere was the worry about it being done by right. But if there's a way to set up that mechanism where it's not done by right, but still clarifies that that's an option for people if they want to explore it.
I'm not sure
Am I
what you mean by
understanding
right.
that?
If I could clarify, the reason why it was done that way was hoping that because it's more expensive for other people to build the housing, right? So if they put the money in the fund, it could delay how soon it gets built. With construction prices go up, and then suddenly it's just a lot more difficult. And so because we didn't foresee folks wanting to build on-site commercial downtown and did not want to miss those opportunities, that is the only area in which it was allowed.
Well, you make a good point, because we're working now to try and set up when we get this first opportunity and talking with Decatur and Atlanta and one other place. It is difficult to set these programs up, and how you think, whatever, government's just, that's the nature of the beast. And so I think you're exactly right. In talking to these other governments, it hasn't been just this clean, crisp thing. You got to provide the provider who's going to do this, and so it's a lot of work, just like goes into working. And so that's the reality. I think that was a smart reality that the committee thought of that. I know that they had, but anyway, we'll work with you however we can. But if we're going to do it, I think we're still right now working through a process. Myself and Sherry, we've had several phone calls with different individuals trying to figure out how. We've always said that the difficult thing with this, even when we do it, is enforcement. I know we've advised y'all that, and other communities, talk about that. And that's a reality. So if they just build it, maybe,
Commissioner Myers, I haven't heard from you yet.
When did we actually have that inclusionary zoning? Did we vote on that? And have we had any proposals come through that have used it yet? what's this, maybe 4 months? or
April
so?
is, I believe, when it
April?
passed, and I understand that planning is working on one right now.
Wow.
That's a new application.
Thank you.
That would be an on-site provision. Commissioner Parker, did you want some follow-up? I saw your hand
I
earlier.
also just wanted to speak to my understanding that on-site improvements do not face the same issue as a payment in lieu, because just the same as we might ask someone to do something about the parking configuration or turning onto a arterial street to make it safer for folks, if folks wanted to choose to put affordable housing on site, that would not be subject to similar
Well,
issues as we face here. Is that my understanding?
well, now that we have it in the ordinance, I think we need to follow our ordinance. I
Right,
really
yeah,
do.
that's essentially
Yeah.
that's essentially it. But and then speaking to the merits of the project itself, it was denied by the Planning Commission. I frankly don't share the same concerns about this site not being able to later be developed as industrial. Just given that it seems like a weird spot to put businesses, given the creek running through it, et cetera. We do desperately need more housing. I think that's the number one thing I hear about from my constituents. But with the concerns about traffic generation on an already very choked street, that's something that I've heard a lot from people. So I do think that while I think this discussion of inclusionary zoning is helpful, just for us to think ahead on how to tackle issues moving forward, we will likely be just considering the merits of the project as proposed.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Thornton, did you have any
No,
follow-up?
my question was answered, thank you.
Commissioner Denson, I saw your hand briefly.
I guess, yeah, I was just going to I would just say that I would be interested in seeing if they were willing just to do building on site according to the ordinance for the inclusionary zoning. I mean, I would, like you said, that would produce more property taxes, which we could then therefore use the other ways, kind of like Commissioner Hamby brought up. But again, I'm not saying that would necessarily outweigh any of the other concerns that you and residents have there, especially, bringing up transit and stuff, and, just knowing that this is going to be built sometime in the future and that we could end up having transit there. So, I mean, just trying to think ahead of time, I guess I would like to see the inclusionary zoning still done if we're going to move forward in that manner.
Commissioner Hamby?
Sure, and I'll just speak to the merits of the project too, and you're certainly hearing the concerns of the neighborhoods, so I'll certainly, that's a big factor for me, and I know you as well, but I will say on the merits of the project, I mean, it's been zoned industrial for over 50 years. It's going to be hard to build an industrial piece on this property because of the creek, and we just saw the map up there about the floodplain, so the fact that it would be housing and you're close to Trail Creek Park or Trail Creek, the Greenway, an exit away from a grocery store. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot to consider.
Yeah,
So, thank
there
you.
are some merits for sure.
Commissioner Hool, any follow-up? All right, we're going to move on to item 10, which is also old business. We're going to, again, see 347 West Hancock. Anything you want to add to discussion we've had already, Commissioner Link?
There is a meeting with the neighbors and the applicant next Tuesday evening. I'll be there. The neighbors will have a chance to voice their concerns directly to the representatives of the fraternity, and we'll see what happens in a couple weeks.
All right. Thanks, Commissioner. All right, moving on to new business. Item 11 is our CDBG CV allocation Part 2. There will be some funding recommendations that you see on September 6th. Any questions about this item?
Basically, it's a placeholder right now, right?
Placeholder, that's right. All right. Item 12 relates to our CDBG program broadly, and this lowers the threshold of match requirement from 50% to 25% for our challenge grant program. Commissioner Denson?
Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, I'm excited to see this on the agenda. We made this change specifically because of the pandemic with some of our previous CDBG allotments. And I think that had some positive developments from the applicants that we saw come through. And of course, in the past, we did not have at all a match. That hence why it was a challenge grant, kind of as was to get newer programs and newer nonprofits able to come in the door. While this still has a match, it's half of what the current one is, down to 25%. which I think is doable on a $10,000 grant. I definitely would be open to having it a little bit lower still, but either way, I'm definitely happy to see this move forward.
All right. Everybody okay with this on consent? All right, Gene, 12 is going to move to consent. All right. 13 follows up on a series of conversations we've had, both broadly and, of course, in relation to our American Rescue Plan Act expenditures. And this would be authorization of a strategic plan to address homelessness. This group, Cloudburst and Metro DC, that would be providing this service, and you can see their qualifications and comparable previous projects that they've worked on in the agenda item. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to read this, but I'm really glad that we have this in front of us. It is long overdue, and we are definitely in a crisis situation when it comes to our homeless situation here. I want to encourage the public to take a look at this. I know we had a lot of interest from the public in anything to do with homelessness and our unhoused residents. So if there's anything we can do within the local government to get the word out that this is before us and get that public input, I'd like to see that, or just make a general call to the public to please read this item, read this strategic plan, and reach out to us with your input.
Commissioner Houle?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm really excited to see this too. I'd like to keep it off consent because I'd like to dig into the details a little more. And I'd also like some clarity, if not now, then when staff is able, on how their work will overlap with the work that we approved a couple weeks ago around affordable housing. I'll reiterate a point that I might be sounding a bit like a broken record about, that I think our affordable housing master planning should be seen as very congruent with anything related to homelessness, because homelessness is fundamentally about housing. So I wish I could somehow have been talking to you all about an agenda item that would have done both at once as one big thing, but I'd like to at least ensure that these things are happening somehow in tandem. So
I don't know if System Manager Jones, if you want to talk about the congruence between our housing work and homelessness work.
Yes, sir. So first, I would like to note we're going to be making some few changes in the deliverables as it relates to this agenda item. It's not going to increase the cost at all. Staff is still working through some issues with, or some items with the consultant.
Prior to your vote.
Prior to the vote. But that being said, each one of the RFPs specifically said that the consultants would have to work with each other, understanding that homelessness and affordable housing kind of go lockstep. HRNA, they have worked with homeless providers, homeless consultants before in other communities, so we wouldn't expect anything else. And I'll note that Mayor and Commissioner, you all are stakeholders, so they will be reaching out to y'all as well to get some information.
And along those lines, we would like to ask you in advance to, use your networks and your communications with your constituents to, Commissioner Link's point, to have folks be notified of the opportunities to weigh in. This is an issue that confronts the entire community, and we need everybody's best thoughts.
Thanks, Manager Williams. Commissioner Myers?
Just to clarify for people watching too, because I think it's a little confusing, and for myself, that this is really what we're voting on is the contract for the company that will be working on the plan. And I also wanted to point out that we have a Mayor and Commission agenda meeting on Thursday and Friday, and I believe some of this will be covered, and hopefully you'll be able to address how what we talk about on Thursday and Friday integrates with these plans as well.
At the retreat?
Yeah, at the retreat.
That's right. We can certainly touch on it. So in preparation of the retreat, is there something specific that you wanted us to prepare for?
No, I was just, I guess I'm just thinking that we're hiring a company to put together and work with the community to make this plan. And I just want us to be cognizant of that when we're discussing this.
Absolutely.
We don't have to come up with a plan on Thursday or Friday or remind other people who are there and present that this is just the beginning and that it ties in with this agenda item and the plan that will be created.
I see. That's correct.
Yeah, and if I might, you're absolutely right. I appreciate you clarifying that for the viewing public. There was a process and timeline that the commission approved back earlier this calendar year. And we'll revisit that tomorrow, but this is totally in keeping with the process that you approved some months ago.
Commissioner Hool?
Yeah, thanks. This has all been really helpful. Because this is such a dense document and the vote that we had just a couple weeks ago, the Affordable Housing Strategic Plan is such a dense document, if there's some way that y'all could highlight or assemble maybe those deliverables that are overlapping between the two, so we can kind of point to those, that would be very helpful. Yeah, thanks.
All right, item 14 is renegotiation of the local option sales tax. Just for edification of this group and the public, state law requires that any county negotiate with its member cities at least once a decade for distribution of local option sales tax. And so that is the single penny of sales tax for which municipalities or counties can use for operating purposes. And so the whole of Winterville and a small portion of Bogart, of course, are in Clarke County. And so we've been at the table with both mayors, Mayor Jones from Bogart, Mayor Farrell from Winterville, and those conversations have been very positive. The method that we have chosen, one of a handful that the state allows, is to look at the relative population of each entity. And really the only point of conversation has been that if we're going to continue to look at population, what we may do is have an agreement that we look at this again in 5 years rather than waiting the entirety of a decade. So I think that pretty well captures it, and you can see the relative population numbers in the document.
Consent.
Everybody okay with this on consent? All right. All right, item 15 is an Athens Transit request to true up funding for FY22, which of course just ended. There was the anticipation of a large tranche of federal funds to be delivered. The delivery of those funds didn't happen in exactly the sequence and timeline that we would have preferred, and so thus we have to move some funds into transit to true up the FY22 fiscal year. So I know Manager Williams would be happy to answer any questions about that.
Consent.
Pretty okay with that on consent?
Yes.
If I just might, as a
Please.
preview, in just 1 minute. So we are about to kick off the next Transit Development Plan, or TDP. As Assistant Manager Edwards and our new Transit Director have dug in on the finances, we need to revisit that. We may do a work session, sort of reorient you, what it means to continue on the fare-free transit trajectory with consideration for the T-SPLOS funding. I know that there may be some expectations that we can increase the number of routes and the frequency, but that's something we really need to take a hard look at and make sure that you're on board with as we enter the TDP as well as next year's budget process.
Commissioner Houle?
Actually, late to realize I have a question about the previous agenda item, if I may, maybe after this.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Just to clarify, when you said the change here is to revisit the negotiation in 5 years rather than 10, is that to revisit the whole thing, or just to say we're going to look at the population numbers again and use the same metric but just update the breakdown if applicable?
Great question. Yeah, I mean, really the desire is to come back to the table in 5 years, but come back to the table in 5 years through the lens of population, rather than go back to square one and say, hey, the state allows this myriad of ways to distribute those funds, and we're going to crack that nut open again. I don't want to crack that nut open again. I'd like to say, hey, population has been the tried and true method by which we've distributed the LOST funds, but we know that the population relative to the size of each of the three communities may shift, and so let's go ahead and take another snapshot in 5 years rather than wait a whole 10.
Okay, and I guess maybe then the question is that avoidance of cracking the whole nut open again captured explicitly in the language of this, or is that just an understanding kind of floating out there that may not be retained particularly well if there are different people in 5 years considering it?
I think the anticipation is that there's going to be an intergovernmental agreement that captures all of that.
Okay. Attorney Drake, could you follow up with us if and when we have that, or just to clarify if we would need that? If we don't.
That is the intent we talked about that. The intergovernmental agreement will be explicit about the 5 years and the
Oh,
method,
yeah.
method of of how we
Examination.
view it. So that, we intend for that to be in there, and that's the understanding with the two towns as well.
Yeah, I apologize, Commissioner, who I lost focus there for a minute, but we'd already planned on having I'm going to draft a short IGA that just says we agree to revisit in 5 years based upon the populations, what you want to limit it to, Mr. Mayor?
Correct. Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, I'm just moving back to the other agenda item.
Thanks for your grace.
15, is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to leave this off of consent so that I can spend a little more time looking at it.
All right, 15, we'll leave off consent.
I had some.
Oh, yeah, go right ahead, Commissioner Edwards.
I thank the manager for bringing up this discussion about, the future of transit in this community. And, I really would like us to focus on quality of service. I'm not quite convinced that the fare-free model has really gotten us where we want to go with our transit system. Great, it's fare-free, but what good is it if I have to wait 45 minutes to get on the bus? So I'm very interested in exploring ways to increase the quality of the service, the frequency of the service. I think that's how we're really going to drive ridership based on research, things I've been reading. So I look forward to more conversation with my colleagues about that.
And Manager Williams, would that work session naturally happen November, December timeframe?
Yes, that's right. And also, what I'm pausing here is the TDB timeline. I'm sorry. Because that's really the time to engage on what's possible. And what I show here is that we should have public and stakeholder involvement, occurring fairly soon. So let me do this. Let me send out the timeline, and we can identify for you where those opportunities to engage are. And then, much like the homeless strategic plan, we'd ask that you let your constituents know as well as we do that this is the opportunity to get those ideas out on the table and then come to some consensus about what the priorities are.
All right, we're going to move on then to item 16. This is the LRC Legislative Review Committee report regarding the one lot removed water access policy for access to fresh water. Commissioner Edwards, did you want to highlight any elements of this?
I would defer to Assistant Manager Jones, who hopefully could plug the breach and provide.
Yes, sir. So this was basically a workflow update. So instead now of the mayor and commission approving every single instance, the public utilities director would have the authority to do so. We went back in time to note that, I guess, in maybe over 20 instances where this request was put forward, it was approved, and it's never been denied. So really, it's just a workflow question.
Questions about that? Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I mean, I know this has posed some difficulty in my district, where you had properties that were constructed and then they came forward for this water access. So it's kind of like putting the cart before the horse. This puts the horse back in front of the cart, essentially, and removes the commission from that decision unless Public Utilities denies it.
That's exactly right. I should have added that. So if there's a denial, the applicant does have the opportunity to come before the mayor and commission at the very next meeting. Thank you for that.
Everybody okay with this on consent?
Yes.
All right. Item 17 is the award of contract for dental insurance. Everybody okay with that on consent?
Yes.
All right, 17 is consent as well. All right, 18, 19, and 20 are going to have more information forthcoming prior to our voting meeting. Commissioner Houle?
Sorry to back us up, but I don't think we can put something on consent that's awarding a contract to TBD, right?
Oh, 17 does not have the contract. Good
So
point.
what do we do?
Thank you for that note. 17 will have to remain off.
Good catch. Good catch.
All right. 18, 19, 20, you'll get more information about in the coming week. Item 25 would be an ordinance under home rule with respect to reducing the quorum requirement for the commission. So this would allow us to conduct business and take a vote with 6 members present. We could actually initiate a meeting with 6 members present, and under home rule, this requires 2 hearings.
It requires what?
Two readings, so we have to look at it for 2 consecutive
Has to be
cycles.
adopted at 2 consecutive meetings.
Has to be adopted it? We have to vote on it twice?
Yes,
Okay.
because it's amendment to the charter. This requirement is saying that currently in the charter says it's 7 commissioners required for a quorum. This would change it to 6. This would not change the requirement that, 6 individuals are required to adopt an ordinance. This is something the mayor approached us about related to, we did have some periods of times where we had a difficult time getting quorum. In trying to think about possible consequences, it might result in there being 3-3 ties, and the mayor might break the tie more, because he has the right to break the tie, but it's something to think about, but.
An ordinance would still require 6 votes.
Yeah, 6
so-
votes, ordinance still requires 6 votes. Yeah.
And so would we adopt this at consecutive voting meetings, or we have a special call? Okay,
Regular
yeah.
meetings. Has to be
Regular
done at
meetings.
regular
Okay,
meetings.
at a regular meeting. So we'll vote on this in September and October.
Yeah, this is a charter
Okay.
amendment, it's under the home rule procedure, it has to be a public notice, it runs in the paper at certain times.
Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, my question, I'm not sure, Judd might have answered it. All the different things that we have voting 2/3 of, and it just seems like the concept for this would need to be more comprehensive. It seems like it's more to this than just this. It seems like it would also affect some of the other.
Well, trying to think about it, I can see, we talked, what are the possible consequences? So you still gotta have 6 for an ordinance. Right now, if it's a non-ordinance, an item can, if there's a quorum here, an item can pass 4-3, right? It doesn't have to have 6 votes if it's not an ordinance.
Right.
And Ms. Jean can.
Grant submission.
So
or-
what could happen here is that an item could pass with 3 votes to the commission, I guess, and the mayor vote the tie, break the tie, So you had 6 here, and if only 6 people were here, a worst-case scenario, 3 people of the commission vote for it, 3 vote against it, and the mayor break the tie, it would pass.
Right, but
And that's why I want to make sure y'all, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that's good or bad, I'm just saying that's the only as I think through consequences, I'm not saying it's a bad consequence, I don't think it would happen that often, but it could happen.
Right.
If.
But isn't some of the difference in a voting scenario and a holding executive session scenario? I mean, those are two
So-
different categories
So
of
right now, we
business.
can't, right now, we can't initiate a meeting without 7. This would allow us to initiate a meeting if there were 6 commissioners present.
Right, but I guess what I'm asking is hasn't the problem been mainly with fulfilling an executive session with lack of 7?
Well,
That's been an example.
yes, that is an example.
Okay.
But if we don't have a quorum, we can't take any votes, so we've always known that,
As well as have executive session.
as well as have executive session, that's
But
right.
I guess for me, it seems like there would be a more comprehensive, I guess having it out into the public for 2 voting cycles. And Commissioner Parker, did they say that we vote on it twice? Was that the
Yeah,
answer,
September
2
and
years?
October, both regular sessions.
So we vote on
Yeah.
it twice, not just
Yep.
read twice. It seems more comprehensive and other things, but it might just be that I'm missing a memo that kind of spells out how it affects the different things, but if you
Well, I
just
wanna-
summarize it and that's it.
Well, that's all I can think about. Some of y'all been here longer than I try to
Yeah.
think about, the mayor approached, I think we recognized, when Gene and the mayor, there was some problems we had for a period. And I don't know if there were problems, but the mayor, well, what if we went to 6 for a quorum? I tried to think about out loud, what are the consequences of that? The worst I think I voiced what I see as the
Yeah.
worst one, but I'm not saying I've seen everyone. I mean, everybody think about it, you know?
Would it be helpful just to see a chart of commission actions and what's required for those actions to take effect?
And a passing a majority number within those scenarios. I think that's along the lines of what I'm trying to visualize in all the different
Well,
scenarios.
the only scenario I can see is, I mean, ordinance requires 6 votes in the charter. That's not going to change. To pass an ordinance requires 6 votes. None of your other items, do y'all have that requirement? If it's just a regular resolution or a motion item.
6 affirmative votes.
6 affirmative votes, but a motion item can pass, and Ms. Jean can correct me if I'm wrong, it can pass with less than 6 votes as long as it's a majority of those present.
So,
four.
for example,
Yeah.
earlier on our agenda, we had this change in cash match requirement of CDBG program. That's not an ordinance. That's just a procedure. And so that could pass with a
4-2.
smaller majority.
4-2.
Sure, 4-2.
So then you
Correct.
have four vote majority.
That's right.
Yeah, if we could have that supplemental information, because if we're going to have 2 rounds of explaining and understanding, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I
Commissioner
agree. I
Hamby?
think the supplemental information would be helpful, and I don't think the Robert's Rules of Orders is impacted by this. I mean, if you do a call to question, you just need 2/3 of the 6 votes
Right,
instead of
it'd be the
2/3.
same rules, yeah.
The only other thing that I had, and the mayor may jump over here in a minute, but I think it takes 7 votes to override a mayor veto.
That wouldn't change.
Well, it ought to change if we're going to 6. I mean, just to be consistent with everything, then it just makes it easy to explain.
That's a decision of the commission.
Yeah, I understand.
But my editorialization would be, keep that the same, in the same way that we maintain 6 votes for an ordinance passage.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm just making it for consistency's sake and for the public's sake. You know, if everything is 6, then people know what the answer is, no matter who's the mayor.
Commissioner Myers?
In this chart, since we're pulling up every possible scenario that's in here, what would happen with this 6 people when the mayor gets COVID and he's not here or she's not here, and then the mayor pro tem, does the mayor pro tem count as a 6, or does the mayor pro tem? So you want to put that in the chart.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so in that event, if there were,
The mayor,
if
right.
the mayor was ill and there were 3 commissioners who were ill, you could conduct business. You could have a meeting
But would you-
under this proposal, which you could not do currently.
well, okay.
No, what I meant,
That's not what she said.
no, that's not what I meant. I meant, so we could have a meeting, would we, would it?
So under our current phenomenon, under status quo as we sit here today, if the mayor was ill and 3 commissioners were ill, but the mayor pro tem was well, you couldn't have a meeting because you wouldn't have 6 commissioners.
Yeah.
Right,
So that's the kind of thinking we need to
Right.
process through
So, yeah,
the
so the question
scenarios,
is, in that
because you wouldn't
case-
have 6 for a quorum if you're presiding.
If you're
Right.
presiding, that's what
right,
you're
right.
saying.
That's what I'm saying. If I were presiding, then would you have to have 6? You're ill, would there have to be 6 people?
There would always have to have
Commissioners
6
as
for
well,
quorum,
in addition to whoever is serving
Presiding
as
officer.
mayor.
That's right. That's-
Yeah.
Commissioner Houle?
Yeah, I'm just going to share that I'm not currently convinced that I want to support this. I'd like to hear more discussion from people about why we think this is a good idea, but in my view, the onus is on us to be at these meetings. It's literally the most fundamental part of our job, and so our struggle to start meetings on time, which has often been executive sessions, but also often been many other things, that's on us to be here on time / be here generally. And I'm hesitant to lower the number of elected officials that need to be present to represent 130,000 people.
Commissioner Denson?
Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, I'm kind of in the same place. I definitely understand the reasoning for doing this, and that we've had the frustrations of not being able to do the people's business. But I'm kind of in the same place. I mean, it's the most important thing. I mean, I think I don't necessarily want to make it easier where elected officials don't have to show up for their job, and maybe possibly making it even, yeah. I mean, I think the bar should be high, and I think that anybody who runs for office should do the job that they were elected for. And I guess, yeah, I'm thinking like if we only have to have 6, I mean, it's one above half the commission. It just seems like that's not, the people deserve better. The people deserve their elected officials to show up and do the job. And I think, at this time, while I completely understand the reasoning behind this, I think that this is the wrong solution. I think the correct solution is just us being able to consistently show up to do the job so that we can enact the business, rather than changing the rules to make it easier to enact the business. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Commissioner Edwards, haven't heard from you. And then turn it to Commissioner Hamby.
I think the flip side of that idea that was just expressed is that, you can get some lackadaisical folks who boycott process for whatever reason, thinking they're going to thwart something and just derail this whole government and keep any business from moving forward. So, whoever shows up gets to make the decision. And if folks want to boycott it and not show up, well, you're just not going to be a part of the process. So I don't see the harm.
Commissioner Myers.
I think this may have been covered earlier, but what is the state rule on this? Is there a minimum for quorum?
No, there's not a minimum, I don't think, but it's in our charter now, so the only way you can amend it's by home rule.
Right.
I think this is something that's allowed to be amended by home rule. I don't think it changes the structure, the form of the government. We're not taking any powers away from the commission and giving the mayor, from the manager, and giving them away. But it doesn't matter to me one or the other. Y'all do what you want to do.
Okay.
Commissioner Hamby.
Well, I can certainly see both sides of it, like Commissioner Edwards said. I mean, in some ways, you could look at this as being a filibuster, where you need 7 there, and I know how probably most of us feel about the filibuster. But also, it has been, we have had it for 30 years. It seems to work, and it seems to, I think, in my, I don't know, I sort of get, I like when the public is able to see the patterns of how and when we vote, and it does seem like a lot of times, and COVID's been a reason for this, like a lot of times that we've had scheduling things that where votes are scheduled on agenda setting nights, or votes are scheduled on work session nights, or such as that, and I think a lot of it has to do with that. I don't think that there's ever been an opportunity. I mean, we may have had to wait a few minutes for a quorum to develop, but I don't know. Maybe you've had to call. Maybe I wasn't at the meeting where you had to call the meeting because there wasn't a quorum. But I'm hard pressed to think of when a vote was missed because of that, and I may be wrong, but. I guess I can see both. I guess I can see both sides of it. I will say this though too. I mean, if you're looking at charter, the synopsis of all the numbers in the charter, the other one is it takes 5 commissioners to call a meeting. Should that go up to 6? I mean, I'm just trying to be consistent across the board, where 6 is kind of the magic number. So anyway, just my 2 thoughts if we were to make that change. But I do see the points of those arguing not to make the change.
Well, at this point, we've got at least two months to think about it and discuss. Manager Williams, any follow-up?
Yes, just as you weigh this, and there's a lot of great points, this also has a small implication with open records, and we'd always caution the commission not from assembling together in larger groups to talk about county business, but this would be a clear reduction from 7 to 6 in that case.
Break up the
That's a
party.
good point. Good point.
And you can thank Assistant to the Manager, Sarah George, for that point.
Good point.
Yep.
So what it means is, 6 of y'all can get together now.
Well, that's already the case because of the committees, though, too.
Yeah. Well, we've learned, though, if it has to be a specific item that committee's taken up, we're taking a little more limited view of that, thanks to Commissioner Houle, his training. But in other words, we reread the law, and we talked that if it's not on a committee agenda, we don't think there's a problem with a quorum of a committee meeting because you're not considering the item, but it's risky because you know how y'all consider all kinds of different items, basically, your committees. But you're right, it would, assist, good point.
And also on that, would it be, like, if 4 people did a commission-defined option, that would be the majority already meeting on the side? I mean, I just think we need to see the numbers.
If you only had 6 people here.
Yeah,
If you only had 6 people, that's right.
yep.
5 people call, special call meeting, 6 people show up.
All right, plenty of time to consider. Plenty of time to consider, given that for affirmation, this would take 2 consecutive votes. All right, everybody ready for planning and zoning?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'm going to call it Planning Director Brad Griffin. I'm going to relocate.
This is not too bad tonight.
All right, so the first planning and zoning item is Highland Park Drive. And so while Brad's getting set up, a call for public input on item 21, Highland Park Drive. Anyone here to speak to that? Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Chris Church, Executive Director of Freedom from Bondage. I live at 194 Highland Park Drive. I just briefly wanted to let you all know that who we are. Freedom from Bondage is a GAR, Georgia Association of Recovery Residences, and THOR, Transitional Housing for Offender Reentry, certified and approved women's sober living. Our goal is to support and recover the recovering woman as she recovers from substance use disorder and rebuilds her life. We provide much more than simply room and board for our residents. Our program is centered around 12-step recovery, and we support all pathways to recovery. We have 2 full-time credentialed full-time staff members. I am a CARES under the Georgia Council of Substance Abuse, and our assistant director is a certified addiction counselor through the Georgia Addiction Counselor Association. We feel we bring value to the neighborhood in several different ways. First is financial value. We have made significant improvements to both the grounds, exterior and interior of the properties we own. It has been said our properties are bright spots in the neighborhood. Secondly, we strive to improve the character value of the neighborhood with our organization's mission, core values, and high standards. I have lived at 194 Highland Park Drive for 10 years next week. I have witnessed and been a victim of the criminal activity on this street. I can say with confidence that the residents of Freedom from Bondage are not the problem. I continue to work for FFB out of my love for recovery and the hopes for the women we serve. Quick statistics that I pulled this afternoon from our outcomes measurements reveal negative drug and alcohol screening. We're at 98% in 2020, 98.5% in 2021, and year-to-date is 98%. We were established to provide safe and sober housing. I am an example of that. In 2008, I got sober at Advantage through the 45-day program. My 20-year marriage was in shambles. My parents deceased. I have no brothers and sisters, and I was lost and I was alone. I learned about Freedom from Bondage. I went there door to door, and I've been sober ever since. And so that is our goal. And any questions?
Chris, thank you. We'll have a presentation and then.
I'm sorry, I thought you asked for public. Did I do it out of order?
No. Just to let you know that during our discussion, if they have any questions, they'll call you up then.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right, is anybody else here to speak to item 21, Highland Park? All right, hearing none, we're going to go ahead and move to staff reports. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. This is actually a request for 3 special use permits at 189, 91, and 93 Highland Park Drive for halfway houses in an RM1 zone with condition, that condition being a buffer condition that was put on many, many years ago when the overall subdivision was developed. It is for a conversion of a triplex into 3 single-family attached residences to be subdivided separately. And as mentioned, the purpose is to create the 3 new halfway houses out of the existing structure. Halfway house zoning procedures follow a different criteria than others do, and so just for your information, the way this works is that you will hold your first of 2 public hearings at your September meeting, but you will not take a vote that night. You will hear from the community. State then requires this item to be held a minimum of 6 months, maximum of 9 months, and then it comes back and you vote on it at that time. Right now, we're tentatively scheduled for, I believe it is March the 7th. It would be your March 2023 meeting that we will bring this back for the final vote on this item. So it's a little different, affords some more time for community input on it. Just quickly, the property here on Highland Park Drive, you see on the screen, the 2 properties immediately across on the other side of the street that you can see are kind of split up into smaller, narrower lots. Those are the 2 existing triplexes that Freedom from Bondage currently operates units out of. Future development map proposed, it would not change anything. It would provide the special use. Same with the zoning. This is how they would subdivide the property if ultimately approved to provide for the 3 individual halfway houses. And the reason for that subdivision largely establishes the number. There are some state requirements in terms of how many residents can be within one of these units. This is the house in question. Recommendation from the Planning Commission, they felt like it was consistent with both the land use and zoning, community need for halfway houses. There is some site work that still needs to go through permitting prior to a final vote, but their recommendation is to approval. And just to reiterate, this does not go back through the Planning Commission process. You hold your hearing and then it comes back to you 6 months later. So you will see this one again in March. And that concludes the staff report.
And Commissioner Myers, this is in your district.
Yes. Thank you for the report, and thank you also to Director Griffin for the answers to questions that he gave me yesterday, and to Mrs. Church as well for her coming and speaking tonight, and to the Planning Department as well. I watched that. I have had several constituents reach out to me about this and was able to visit with one of them who lives actually immediately behind the property, who I believe Mrs. Church has already spoken with. And I would like to suggest, and I have already reached out to those constituents, if they could be able to meet with Mrs. Church, perhaps we could follow up with that, or you can contact with me with that. I know that one of the home closest to this property really sits way back on the property and is quite close to the property line for this Highland Park address. And that homeowner actually was very open to working with Freedom from Bondage. There are some other concerns that I'm hoping that if the neighbors could meet with your group and have some more discussion, that some of their concerns might be addressed. This is a lot of halfway houses in that area. And I know that road has had its own troubles that were alluded to before with crime and such. So I'm hoping that we could have some discussion between this applicant and the neighbors in McDuffie Drive. And some people will say, oh, McDuffie, that's a Crestwood, that's so far away. But if you pull up Google Maps, and you'll see that it's very close indeed. They're just, backyard neighbors here. And you can see, I think, on you can see right over there on that right side, those properties there are quite close. So I do understand and respect the concerns of the residents there. And hopefully, we can get some of that addressed. Previously, I thought we'd be voting on this. I did not understand this process, but we will not be voting on this again till February, and so that gives us some time to understand some things. I would like to ask the applicant, though, there are a couple of things about the application, and one is that some of the documents that were included in here were from 1998, and I assume they were from a previous application, and if perhaps they could be updated.
Absolutely, yes.
As well. And let me see, I mentioned that. And I think that's my biggest concern. I think some of the statistics that you shared just there with the testing and so forth might be good ones as well for the people in the neighboring neighborhood to understand.
Certainly. I'll be more than happy to. And I actually only saw those letters today when I was scrolling through this that was coming this evening. And I totally understand where she's coming from. The term halfway house sounds scary anyway. And, you know, although we're trying to work on, in America, reducing stigma around substance use disorder and things like that, I would welcome the opportunity to just really be transparent and let anyone know what we do there, give tours, you know. We do screen our ladies and a lot of concerns they have.
I think that would be helpful. And I know this is an interesting situation because I am now the commissioner for this area, but in March when we'll be voting on this will be in District 1, and therefore that will be in Commissioner Davenport's neighborhood district. So perhaps he'd like to mention something as well. I'm not sure. Or he'll come with us to this meeting, right?
Other commission
Okay.
input? Commissioner Edwards, Wright, and Houle?
Yeah, I had a, excuse me. It struck me hearing about your organization that perhaps some of your clients, if they don't find you, maybe they're going to be homeless. Yeah. So I know we're about to spend $160,000 on a homeless study, but you know, this is kind of the brass tacks of attacking homelessness problems in our community. So I'm inclined to support this and follow the recommendation of our planning commission. Thank you.
Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, my question, Brad, can you give us a little summary of why staff denied?
The biggest reason that staff brought forward a recommendation to not approve was the issue of just of density and impact on, because these are special uses. The way we evaluate them is to ensure that we're not impacting the otherwise permitted uses by the introduction of this use into an area. We've gotten into concentration of uses on millage as it relates to Greek organizations and how many is too many. I've had the question, you know, what is that number? I don't know that number. You know, it was something that we felt compelled to at least bring forward to have this discussion as part of it. You know, is 6 fine and 9 too many? So that's the primary reason. Other than that, I can tell you from a staff standpoint, to my knowledge, we've never had any complaints on the existing units that are on Highland Park.
Right, and so that's what the 3 triangles are for the 2 other ones, and then if this passed, then we'd have 9 little
There would
triangles.
be one on this side of the road that included up to 3, and then 2 existing structures with up to 3 each.
Right.
And those have both been in place for some period of time.
Yeah, so the
Yes.
triplex, I mean, these are existing, it's not new infill, it's just making it affordable and diverting potential homeless scenario
Yes.
as well. Okay, thanks for that explanation, I appreciate it.
Commissioner Houle and then Commissioner Link.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I feel very supportive of this project, and I'm honestly very troubled by the concerns I've heard raised, which have only been raised so far in writing to the Planning Commission or to us. I was at the Planning Commission meeting and no one came to speak against. Maybe it's easier to say discriminatory things from a keyboard, but if I read the letters that are worried about this proposal, they come across to me quite frankly, as discriminatory. And I think my colleagues have already highlighted that, we're talking about a housing crisis in this community, a homelessness crisis in this community, underfunding mental health, underfunding behavioral health, and we have members of our community stepping up and trying to address the problem when we're still failing to meet the scale of the problem. So there's always going to be people who don't want things in their backyard and who are afraid of things, but we have our planning director telling us that we've never had a complaint about the existing units. This is an organization with a strong reputation, and I really hope that in 6 months, when we have an opportunity to vote on this, we will take seriously the work that's being done and not let some discriminatory concerns drown out the good work. Thanks.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I just wanted to make the comment that I don't see how the activity that would take place at these residences is much different from the activity that would take place in any normal residence. I mean, you don't have large gatherings, there's not a lot of coming and going. There's probably less coming and going than in a lot of, like student-oriented housing. We talk about the Greek-oriented housing on Millage, the concentration of that being a problem, but that's a whole different beast with large gatherings and parties and things, and you're certainly not having those kind of activities at these residences.
Commissioner Thornton?
I definitely am looking forward to Commissioner Davenport's feedback after he meets with the group. I really think this is definitely needed, and I think that whatever, as Commissioner Myers said, that the neighbors could work it out. When we talk about other areas that are congested and crime, just all over the place, it's nowhere near, you're not even in the same conversation. And so right now I support this project, but I do think that Commissioner Myers and Commissioner Davenport could get together and to come to some consensus. I really believe when things come before us, if there was a way that community folk could talk before it even comes before us, I think we'll do so much better in our deliberation. But you do have some time, doing good work. Keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. All right, next item, number 22, is an amendment to PD at 100 Prince Avenue. Is anyone here to speak to that item? I'm here to speak to 100 Prince. All right, Brad, we'll go ahead and have the staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a request to amend the existing PD for 100 Prince Avenue. I'll be honest with you, this one came really close in our deliberations internally to being sent to you as an administrative action. The reason I did not send it and made that decision was the expansion of the patio area, turning the corner and kind of being between the chapel and Pulaski Street, and then the modification to the pedestrian access point through the property. I felt like it deserved at least an opportunity for a little more community input, or at least to allow the community to be able to see it instead of us requesting that we do it administratively through your approval. So it is not a significant amendment. It's to modify the landscaping and hardscape around the currently being remodeled chapel by replacing some tree planters, expanding some planting beds, creating some more private or at least enclosed spaces in an area right now that is fairly open with just 2 or 3 tree islands. Expand the front plaza into a courtyard in front of the chapel by just turning the corner along the Pulaski Street frontage, and then it will sit up above grade on Pulaski, so it should not be any type of significant impact, to create an outdoor gathering area to serve a future event space within the chapel building. Here's the portion of the overall PD that is being looked at. Existing zoning, commercial downtown plan development with some RM3 along the back corner. And then you can see here the chapel building being there in the center. Right now we've got this patio, so they're requesting to add this little addition along the side here, as well as make these modifications in the current existing chapel to enclose that area a little bit. Current conditions, that's the front. That's what the pass-through for pedestrian access looks like now. And looking at it from the other direction towards Prince from the top. And then just some proposed renderings of how that enclosed space with the low retaining walls would wrap the corner along Pulaski with some landscaping. You see it there from the Pulaski Street frontage. And then these are the enclosed planting areas internal that we were looking at a minute ago where the 3 trees currently are planted. It does a couple things. It encloses space. It provides some more outdoor seating. It also provides some semi-private opportunity for the event space to allow people to move in and out of that facility and still allow public pedestrian access to move from Prince throughout the development and not be moving through each other. Recommendation, this is consistent with the land use map, zoning, and the current ordinance. The trade-off between the pedestrian traffic flow capacity and the expansion of the public gathering space, we feel like there's benefit to what is being proposed by the applicant, and the Planning Commission recommends approval.
Commissioner Thornton?
Mary Kurtz? That's you, that's all you.
Consent?
I look forward to strolling through the expanded canopy.
Right.
It's
Me too.
beautiful,
Great.
it's beautiful.
Next.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I mean, I know this area very well and ride by almost every day, and I think this, and I was real involved in the initial conversations and public meetings and public input about this whole PD in the first place, and I think this looks good. It's a great idea. I think it'll actually enhance that corner significantly, and it'll be nice to see that beautiful historic structure put into use.
Anyone else? All right, next item 23 is for 4555 Lexington Road. Is anyone here to speak to 4555 Lexington Road? You can just give us your name, and you have 3 minutes for public input.
All right, I'm Jeff Carter with Carter Engineering Consultants, and I'm speaking in favor of this project. I'm actually here just to listen and try to answer any questions that you may have. Just a couple of quick notes. This property is sandwiched in between property zoned RM1 to the east and RS15 to the west. And we feel like this is a rezoning this property to RS8, which is what we're asking for, is really a good transition between the 2 zonings. If you look at this general area, there are quite a few properties that are zoned RS8. And there's actually a lot RM1 and RS15, so there's a really good mix of residential property here in this area. And the only other thing I wanted to point out is we are offering a 50-foot undisturbed buffer to the RS15 property to the east, meaning that we're just not going to touch it, we're going to leave it alone, and that's more than what is required, but we are providing that. And this project does meet the future land use plan, land use map, and we would appreciate your support, and again, be glad to try to answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there anyone here to speak otherwise to 4555 Lexington Road?
Hi. I'm Judy Warner. I'm a resident of the East Hampton Addition, which is to the east of this area. And we spoke with our commissioner earlier today, and we were planning on being here around 7. We thought the discussion on this would be later. So there are 8 to 10 members that were supposed to come, but I'm the first one here. But I do want to speak against it right now. The addition of East Hampton, which is right to the east of this, is it's been there since the 90s. And most everybody in there are seniors, not everybody, but it's got 1 road in. There's only 32 houses, so there doesn't need to be 2 places of egress. So we have 1 road, no sidewalks. Most of our seniors spend time walking on that road. It's a mile, a round trip on that road. We're very concerned about having the traffic in there. If they rezone it to an 8 where they can have 80-some houses in there, they would have 2 roads that would go onto our road. So the traffic would become much of a nightmare for that area, especially with, as I said, as we use it as it is. It would be hard for the school buses getting around. It would be hard for a lot of things. We're very concerned about not having houses there was fine. I mean, if they could keep it at RS-15, that would be 40-some houses. They could still have houses there. The property could still be used, but we would still have some safety and traffic issues that would be resolved by not having that many houses in that area and having 2 streets that tie into our road. So, and we're very concerned about the traffic and the safety.
Thank you, Ms. Warren. Anyone else here to speak of 4555 Lexington?
My name is Jungen Evanson. I live at 350 Woodgrove Drive, the same area, the East Hampton area. I kind of came here more just as I was curious as to what was going on and to, I guess, share how I feel or what I think about the rezoning our community. I don't know anything about what this R8 and 15 stuff means. So I'm looking forward to the presentation a little bit. I do think that Athens does need more affordable housing, and I'm for building more affordable housing. So one of the concerns I wanted to express was I wanted to know what kind of housing was going into this new rezoning area. I just want to make sure that's affordable, because with a lot of the changes that they've made on the east side, I feel like it's not been fair to maybe certain populations. There was a trailer park that was between my place or our neighborhood and Walmart that was torn down, and I know somebody that lived there and they had a very hard time finding another place to rent. And so I just want to make sure that whatever houses are built are something that is affordable, because I'm pretty sure the cottages that they built are not affordable to the people who used to live in that area. I do also have the concern about the roads and adding roads to the East Hampton area. I currently live way at the end of the East Hampton neighborhood, which is at a cul-de-sac, which I really enjoy because there is no traffic. And with our lifestyle and our having like lots of dogs and everything, I really enjoy the quietness of the neighborhood. And there are a lot of people that walk on that neighborhood, and the lack of sidewalks is a concern for like all the pedestrians that are out and about there, and the dogs and things like that that are walking the neighborhood. And I like seeing all the people walking the neighborhood. So I would hate for that to go away because there's increased traffic. So I do have a concern about a road being added to the cul-de-sac where I live, because I'm concerned that it would affect the quiet that my husband and I get to enjoy. But I also really do want there to be affordable housing as well. So finding that balance is what I wanted to share.
Thanks, Ms. Evans. Thanks. Is anyone else here to speak of 4555 Lexington? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and have the staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm going to spend a little more time on this one. There's some things that I want to make sure you all understand with this request. First and foremost, you have a plan in front of you that shows a subdivision design, but this is a straight rezoning request from RS-15 to RS-8. So that subdivision design, as you see it, is not binding like it would be with a planned development. The request to rezone from 15 to 8 will take it from a density of 2 lots per acre to about 3.8 lots per acre with the RS-8. So it doesn't quite double the number of units, but it does increase the allowable density. For 87 units, there is a right-in, right-out approved access point onto Lexington. And there are 2 points of access to Woodgrove Drive, which is the East Hampton subdivision. Here you see the existing property, and as the speakers before you mentioned, you see East Hampton just to the right of the property in question. The larger piece to the left that is between the Walmart and this property is currently being developed as the cottages at Lexington. In the aerial, you can see it under construction. You see the density of what is now East Hampton to the right. East Hampton, when it was designed, it is a cul-de-sac that the road terminates at the property line of this parcel. It is in excess length for a cul-de-sac, and it's got too many lots to meet current code, but it was allowed to be developed in that way with the stub, knowing that at some point when this property was developed, it would provide a provision for a secondary means of ingress and egress. Right now, Woodgrove Drive, if something were to happen, a along with the wooded area before you get back to the houses, and that road was blocked. There's no secondary way out of this subdivision. Cottages at Lexington, this is the RM property to the west immediately of this property. Higher density, these are rental townhouse units that are currently under construction. This is the wooded entrance into East Hampton, which is zoned RS15, as is the property currently that you're considering. Planning Commission looked at this and felt like that there probably were some benefits to a transitional density between the cottages and the existing East Hampton subdivision. But you can see there on the drawing how the road hugs the property line and then it moves away, and when you get up to the top of it, that cul-de-sac hits this property line. And that's important from a development standpoint because whoever develops the property that we're looking at this evening has a right to connect to that road. In fact, we're going to require them to connect to that road in order to not have two cul-de-sacs. It's also important from a standpoint that because of the location of Woodgrove Drive, which is right here, which is the entrance to East Hampton, which is directly across from the entrance to Southeast Clarke Park, there's a median break there. There will not be a median break at the access point into this property if it were to be developed under RS15 or RS8 density standards. So you would either, there will be a right in, right out, so you will either come and U-turn or you would come and access, if this property were developed, the access point would be all the way at the end where that cul-de-sac hits the property. And I'm not trying to say that to be an advocate for this rezoning. There are things that this property can do today by right that staff has no ability to control. So with this design, you see the connection point, right there where my arrow is. That tie-in is permitted by right administratively. The second that is being shown with this plan, which is currently non-binding, but it was done intentionally by the developer, is right here, really before you, it's directly across from the cul-de-sac and before you get into the bulk of the houses on Woodgrove. The thinking there is that the majority of the people, when this is developed, regardless of the density, are going to enter in, they're going to make a left onto Woodgrove, and they're going to come in and then turn left into their development instead of going all the way to the end and then working their way back towards wherever their house is in this property. So they were trying to divert the traffic before it went past the houses in what is East Hampton subdivision. The other thing they're showing is the 50-foot undisturbed buffer. There is no buffer required between single-family zoning designations. So if this were to be built by right today, it would be about half the density that you're seeing now in terms of number of lots. Those lots could go all the way to the rear property lines of the houses in Woodgrove. There would be no buffer required, and there would be no second access at the entrance of the subdivision. So I think, and the reason I'm telling you this is I think that's what the Planning Commission looked at and saw as there is some opportunity to get some more density here and to provide some protection that's not otherwise afforded currently under existing zoning to East Hampton subdivision. And that's why the recommendation that they made, which is different than a recommendation staff made to them, is to approve this rezoning, but to add two conditions. One, that 50-foot undisturbed buffer be required, and that two, the second connection to Woodgrove that is really before you get to the majority of the houses in East Hampton has to be installed as part of this development in that location. And so with that, the Planning Commission recommendation was to approve with those two conditions. And I'm sorry if I went on a little bit with that one, but right now, just straight zoning, but those two conditions would at least lock those two things in place if approved.
Commissioner Davenport, this is your district.
Yes, and I do apologize, Mayor, and to my colleagues, but I did ask some residents to come out to speak, and unfortunately, I thought this meeting would last a little bit longer than expected, and I just wanted to respect their time. And I'm just wondering, could just a few of the, Athens residents can come up and speak for
Sure.
a lot of 3 minutes.
Be glad to consent to that. If there's anyone who has not spoken yet, to 4555, now's that time. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to be heard. My name is Robert Dean. I live at 235 Woodgrove. My time to speak is short, so I'll concentrate on our main concern, which is over traffic. The rezoning notice showed us a blank space without showing us a developer plans to run 2 roads into Woodgrove Drive for ingress and egress. Approval sought now, we'll worry about the details later. The pending application for rezone, part of the project hides the main issue, inadequate access for the entire project, including the subject area. You can look at the satellite photo, which I sent in an email earlier. Developer's agent assured the Planning Commission that a traffic study was done and there were no problems. The study of an unknown date surely did not consider the effect of the traffic on Woodgrove Drive. I did not hire a traffic consultant myself, but common sense tells you that hundreds of cars going down a cul-de-sac is going to create traffic problems. Woodgrove has about 30 houses. Let's say their average house has a vehicle that makes only one trip a day. That's 60 transits. You add 90 units from the subject area, you're adding another 180 transits. You add that to what Woodgrove to start with, you got 240 transits a day, 4 times what Woodgrove is handling right now on a cul-de-sac, which has no sidewalks and which is used by mostly senior citizens. It doesn't matter if you change the load rate. You can make it 2 vehicles a day, 3 vehicles a day. It's always going to be 4 times as many because the subject area has 4 times as many houses as Woodgrove. So if you look at the satellite photo, you'll see on the east side of that property, there's no way to get in or out to Lexington Drive. That's a problem. The developer has to solve its access problem. Its solution is send everybody over to Woodgrove Drive. Requiring an access road from the subject area directly to Lexington would not just be for the benefit of the residents of Woodgrove. It would benefit all the renters and owners of the new subdivision. They don't want to all drive down a cul-de-sac to get out either. So the only one that benefits by this plan is the developer. They can make some more money. The main difference is they do not want to run a road out to Lexington because it would cost more money. There's a creek there. They'd have to provide drainage or some way to get the road over the creek. That's the problem. They don't want to spend their money to solve their access problem. They'd rather have the people on Woodgrove solve their problem for them. We just ask that you respectfully deny the rezoning application unless the developer takes responsibility for its own problems and doesn't make their problems the problems of the residents of Woodgrove. Thanks for your attention.
Appreciate it. Anyone else? Speak before you talk.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Moore, and I live at 320 Woodgrove Drive. And I thank Mr. Davenport for meeting with us today, and thank you for letting us speak for a minute or two. I'm basically the community organizer for East Hampton. We do not have an HOA, so I communicate with the neighbors. We email, text, call. I also supervise the mowing of the front entrance and collect funds once a year to support that mowing. Currently, we have a green space that does prevent some of the sound from the cottages. Now, of course, as they were being built, there was a lot of noise, but they do serve as a buffer. And as Bob mentioned, our neighborhood does not have sidewalks. And so we walk, exercise in the road. A lot of neighbors walk their dogs in the road. And of course, with more traffic flow, that would be more dangerous. So we appreciate your listening to us and would just ask that this would be a no rezone.
Hi, my name is Jean Cook, and we just moved into the neighborhood. It is a varied neighborhood. Most of us are senior citizens. We enjoy the area, but my big question is, we're not against them using their property. We are against it being rezoned for a higher density. Why do we have to ruin our neighborhood to allow another neighborhood to exist. And the way I look at it, there's going to be 350 cars a day coming up and down our streets. Because if you have 87 houses and you have 2 cars per house that have to go in and out, do the math. I've been out of school too long, I can't remember, but it's a lot, okay? So please, just keep the rezoning as it is, and we would thank you for it, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk to you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Gene. Can I get your last name for the record?
Cook.
Cook, thank you. Anyone else here to speak at 4555 who has not spoken yet? Thank you all for coming this evening. Thank you. Commissioner Davenport.
All righty. Okay, so this one is, and I do have, so one of the reasons why there's not a site plan attached to this, I talked to the applicant beforehand, just to talk about, just the buffer and some other issues. So, and I look forward to meeting with TPW and the applicant as well later this week to talk about this project. This project is unique, so try to be brief. 2019, when I came into office, the family owner had the property owner had contacted me and said, Patrick, I don't know you, but I'd like to develop this property. They're the property owner. They're getting up in age. They have the brother and sister have moved away. The sister lives in Atlanta. The brother lives somewhere in Florida. And he was like, do you know anybody local to develop this property? I'm like, yeah, we have an affordable housing issue. Let's put some affordable housing. And then I let him, the developer and the property owner, hash it out from there. So, East side is growing. This is right next to the Chapman property. We need affordable housing. One of the reasons that the density is this high is to make the homes more affordable. I understand the concerns of the residents, but I will be talking to the applicant later this week about other options. But as it stands, this is a complement from the RM1 to the RS15 that's next door. This side of town is growing. We have another project on the Lexington Road side. Upper on the Lexington Road side will have similar density. This complements the future land use map. But one of the reasons why I asked the applicant to hold just the site plan, just for me, from my perspective, there's some issues that I would like to understand better and ways we can improve this property.
Thanks, Patrick. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I just want to point out that RS8 density, it allows for single-family homes on minimum size 8,000 square foot lots. That's the density of most of our in-town neighborhoods. My neighborhood in Boulevard is RS8. This is not a bunch of houses packed together. This is kind of your normal kind of suburban or in-town single-family neighborhood style. This is a difficult piece of property in that it's this long, skinny piece. I can see a definite benefit in connecting those roads and assuring that there is a way to get out of that Woodbridge neighborhood if something were to happen to block the street. Right now, we don't allow subdivisions to be built that have this one in, one out kind of entryway. It's a real hazard as far as safety vehicles accessing them. I would like to see a site plan. Typically, when we do this kind of rezoning, we ask for a binding site plan. But then again, I can't imagine what else could be done other than this kind of layout. This is a prime location, maybe once upon a time, 20, 30 years ago, when our last zoning map was done, this was a somewhat rural kind of area, but it's not anymore. This is a fairly urbanized part of town. Walmart is right next door. You've got a lot of development going on in that immediate area, a lot of easily accessible goods and services and stores, and it's not far from Cedar Shoals High School. Honestly, those less dense single-family zones, those kind of RS 12 and 15 and 25, those are relics of a racist zoning past. They were intended to jack up the prices of property and keep single-family homes accessible from people of lower income, most often people of color. We have a desperate, desperate need for middle-income housing in this community. Smaller lots, smaller homes that are accessible to people, normal working folks. I mean, in this day and age, I doubt that any brand-new home is going to be what most of us would consider affordable. But compared to the going rate of most homes, you're more likely to get something that is accessible to your middle-class wannabe home buyer with an RS5 zone than you will, or with an RS8 zone, or an RS5 for that matter, than you will with an RS12. The RS12, they'll need, much more land to build on, and land is at the premium. We have real needs in this community, and we need to consider the needs of the greater good. UGA just announced its largest incoming freshman class ever. Every single one of those kids is a threat to pushing another family out of their home, and we need to find places in Athens-Clarke County for these families to go.
Commissioner, just a quick correction. In our current zoning code, we've got RS5, 8, 15, and 25. We don't have an RS12.
Did I say 12? Sorry. RS5, okay, sorry.
Commissioner Denson?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just had a quick question to Brad. In understanding the need, for the two exits here, and definitely hearing, the concerns about the cul-de-sac and seeing how that probably will lead most traffic down that road. Is it possible, would this design fulfill the needs if we didn't have the through cul-de-sac, but only had the cutover at Woodhurst Drive that connected over? That would not fulfill?
It would not, but I'm glad you asked the question because it gives me an opportunity to clarify something I heard from the neighbors, just to make sure they understand and that I was not unclear. The design that's shown, even though it's conceptual at this point, has the two access points that both touch Woodgrove, but it also then has the road that extends out and hits Lexington. Mm-hmm. This could not be developed without that extension to Lexington.
Right.
They could not cut that part off and just use the 2 points onto Woodgrove, because in effect then what we've done is we've just made the cul-de-sac longer and put more units on it that could be essentially locked in. So it could be developed without the connection that goes across in the middle, Commissioner. But unless, once you got to that point to where you had the road that came in off Lexington, you had the connection across from the cul-de-sac. If you did not connect to the back, they could only extend that road about 1,500 feet, but they could only put 19 lots on it. So it would
Gotcha.
increase it, because that at that point would be where the cul-de-sac started. It would still then also create probably a cul-de-sac issue that was non-compliant with Woodgrove too, without that connection. Now, what they could do is they could eliminate that connection across from the cul-de-sac and just have a very long loop in, hit it in the back, and then go back out to Lexington and not have the connection point in the middle. And it would be compliant because we don't have a cul-de-sac issue at that point.
Right.
But we could not do it without the connection in the back.
Yeah, I mean, the hope I was trying to get to is that people would use that cut through rather than going all the way down to the cul-de-sac.
And I think that's what the developer was looking at too, was.
Right.
Yeah. People leaving this development, if it were to be built, and going back into town, I mean, the large turning movement leaving this project would be to turn right.
Yes.
But they can't turn left without going back down to the light at Walmart and making a U-turn. But people coming to the development from town, they've got the option of either doing a U-turn at the medium break and then coming in to the new street, or coming into the subdivision. People typically don't like to make U-turns. They're going to come into Woodgrove Drive, but then The developer was trying to get them off of Woodgrove before it got back to where the houses were.
Yeah.
And that is, based on the planning commission recommendations, that connection in that location would be binding if this were approved.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else before I return to Patrick? Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, I just wanted to see if that, something that was Brad referred to at the beginning, the fact that that cul-de-sac touches the property and the road touches the property. I don't know if I processed completely what you said. Was that an indication that it was there to be built onto, or could you review that again?
I can't give you the exact year, but it was because of the shape and the configuration of the property that was developed as East Hampton, because it's long and narrow too, like this one. They had cul-de-sac issues when it was developed, and were going to be limited in their density and their design and the number of lots. And the solution was, and I'm not 100% sure if this was, I think this ultimately was with a variance granted by the hearings board many years ago, that they granted the variance to allow the development with the stipulation that that cul-de-sac right-of-way touch this property to allow for future interconnection and ultimately a development that would have more than one way in and out of it. So that's going to be a requirement to connect. It was designed to connect, and any development of this property, whether it be under RS-15 or 8, is going to connect to that cul-de-sac.
And following up on that, how about that large tract at the beginning of Woodgrove that isn't developed? Are there plans to develop that?
On this property?
Yeah, not, right. I mean, it's a little odd for me looking at this, why the Woodgrove has that, if you coming in off of Lexington on the right, there's a big piece of property that's not developed, right?
It's developed. There's a big white house there now.
Okay.
Yeah. The reason the large tract on this one in the front is not developed is sewer.
Okay.
They don't have sewer access once you get to that point on the project.
Commissioner Wright?
Commissioner Myers, are you done?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a few questions. I have a lot of concerns, and it's density related with this new plan. I appreciate you pointing out that it probably, the cul-de-sac, and I guess everybody in that neighborhood who's come to speak knew that that was going to connect someday, right? Or not necessarily?
I don't know if they knew it.
It's not a cut, it's not a driveway? It's just an empty lot among the cul-de-sac?
There's a cul-de-sac.
An easement. There's obviously an easement there
With a
already.
right-of-way connection, but I don't believe it's paved to
Okay.
where it
But
looks like it's an extension.
It's an easement, it's not somebody's yard,
Correct.
that part.
It's a right-of-way.
Tell me about the existing neighborhood. Do they get to turn left on Lexington Road?
The existing East Hampton neighborhood, they can, yes, they can make a left. It's
So
an
the new,
unsignalized left on the Lexington Road, but they do have a full median cut.
right, so then the new neighborhood with double size as this presentation is coming forward, they would go back to that first little cut through so that they could go through their neighborhood and do a left out and not do the right only.
If they were leaving the development in question and wanting to go east on Lexington Road.
To the park or to the park.
Or to the park where they would go straight across. You can see, trying to do it without advancing.
Yeah,
There's where Woodgrove,
it's tough, isn't it?
there's where Woodgrove hits, and it's
Yeah.
right across from the entrance to the park. But that is also the point that if they wanted to make a left and go east towards Oglethorpe County, they would go over to Woodgrove and exit out.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Can you go to the site plan? I know this is not binding. The only thing binding is the buffer, I believe. Can you help with the traffic flow that has been, so has this, it's not binding, but has it been approved because there's alleys and a roadway in the middle? Can you explain that? What kind of traffic pattern is in
yes.
there?
I mean, the public street is what you see going right down the center.
With the
And then-
trees.
With the trees, and then the little jog that moves to the bottom and hits Lexington. And then it gets to the back and it turns and ties into Woodgrove's cul-de-sac. the width with the density and the width of those lots, the majority of those houses are being served by alleys in the back because of driveway separation issues between them.
Right.
And so in order to develop at this type of a density in small lots and to be able to set aside buffers and other things, they're choosing to alley load from the back instead of each house having its own driveway.
So basically, there's 3 roads in there, 2 alleys and 1 down the middle.
As currently designed, yes.
It's very car-centric.
But again,
to be
yes.
that dense.
It would, yeah, it's, you're right. Other than the buffer and the connection in the middle
Yep.
to Woodgrove, everything else theoretically could be completely redesigned and changed.
Right. And the build by right, tell me how many units would be in there with the current RS 8, no, RS 15, which is the current. I got it mixed
I
up.
mean, probably about 40, 45. Let me get an
40.
acreage on it.
But the current zoning is the same density as the current neighborhood, right?
Yes, 26, almost 27 acres at 2, so that's
Gotcha.
54, and you've got to pull out some for if there are any environmental areas and open space.
All right,
But
water, yeah. So then if it was built by right, they would definitely need to use their easement that's already been, not built in, but
yes,
in place since that neighborhood was made and this one, which basically kept this from being undevelopable, that easement, right?
that connection,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
And they could get about, when it's all said and done, 50, 52 lots.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
it's difficult to try to sit here and point out advantages to this rezoning to people that don't want it. I completely understand that.
Right.
But if there is an advantage, it is the second connection to Woodgrove, because they've got it, their road's got to come out on Lexington as well, and the 50-foot buffer.
Right.
If they developed it with 50 lots, they could essentially clear it right to the rear property lines of the neighbors on Woodgrove with no buffer, no fence, no anything.
Right. And it'd just be
we
another.
could not require a buffer.
It'd be somebody's backyard up against your
Yes.
backyard. All right, that's very interesting. I just think that as a group, when we think about affordable housing, we should also consider quality of life. That's really dense in there. Thank you for your information.
Yes, ma'am.
Still got Commissioner Hool and Commissioner Thorpe.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 questions. The first was, a lot of the Planning Commission discussion was around tree canopy and distinguishing between conserved canopy versus new plantings. And I see that they've added the stipulation of the 20% conserved canopy. And there was kind of this question, as I recall, about how the arborist would weigh in on that between their discussion and our final vote. Could you clarify for us what, if any, role staff would play in that change to conserved canopy? Because my understanding is one of the main reasons staff was recommending denial was concerns from the arborist. Is that correct?
Well, there was a couple reasons. There were some issues potentially with canopy because it was going to reduce it. But with a lot of these rezonings, one of the things, especially when it is a straight rezoning without a binding plan, one of the things we're going to look at is justification of why they can't use the property as presently zoned, which in this case was compatible with the adjacent subdivision. And we really weren't able to, on its face as a straight rezoning, we did not see the benefit to increasing the density given the other restrictions and the fact that this development would be required to tie in to East Hampton. And we're increasing the density on this one and putting them into their roads. But we also, the condition of the buffer, the increase of the canopy, and the other connection being binding is what the Planning Commission relied on. Now, from a standpoint of increasing the conserved canopy, really no way for me to tell you that until, if this were to be approved, it becomes a condition of your ordinance, and therefore there is no wiggle room for a developer when they do submit a development plan. They've got to submit it with 20% conserved canopy, which is about 5% more than what they have currently. So there would have to be those modifications made, or they would have to come back to this body to amend that condition.
It's 5% more than what they have currently, but still below what would be required under RS 15.
Under RS 15, yes.
Is that 30%, am I remembering?
I think so, yes.
And then my other question is about pedestrian facilities. I mean, speaking to quality of life, you know, this is right across from the park, and if I'm remembering correctly and quickly looking at Google Maps correctly, there's no real safe pedestrian crossing to the park right across the street. I'm just curious, if future development happens in this area, what, if any, pedestrian facilities would be required?
Only internal to the development. The street that
Only
is
internal,
built
yeah.
from Lexington to the cul-de-sac would be required to have sidewalks on both sides. So all the public street infrastructure would be required to meet our current requirements, but there would not be a requirement going into East Hampton or Woodgrove to install sidewalks off-site.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll just share for my colleagues that I currently feel very undecided on this. I look forward to hearing what Commissioner Davenport, thinks, especially, after you get more time to talk with colleagues and such. But, one additional condition I'd be interested in is something about pedestrian facilities to safely cross to the park, which may provide a benefit to existing residents as well as future residents. So if the recommendation from Commissioner Davenport is to move forward with approval, that's something I'd be interested in seeing maybe tacked on.
Just kind of on that point, while we've got Brad here, of course, Highway 78 is a GDOT right-of-way, and so there's some mitigating factors, so we just don't have complete control over that cross-access. I think that's fair to say.
Right, no, I would completely agree. Any longer-term park-related development issues, because it's the main entrance there, could ultimately long-term affect in a positive way the ability for pedestrians to get across right there as well. But at this point, I don't think that we could go off-site to an existing intersection and condition. I think those types of improvements are beginning to kind of stretch out that rational nexus of what we can condition based on the impact of this development.
Even though the lot fronts the road?
Well, I mean, the frontage along Lexington, if there's not a sidewalk there of this development, you could have those sidewalks installed. But if we're talking about the intersection where Woodgrove hits, that's moving up the road to an existing intersection that's in place now that, I mean, if I'm the developer there, I'm arguing that you're asking me to put in pedestrian intersection improvements at this intersection. County built a park and they didn't do it, so why do I have to? I mean, those are the types of things that you just got to be careful with when you start trying to put conditions off-site.
Commissioner Thorne?
I guess I really do appreciate everybody's technical discussion, and I'm looking forward to what Commissioner Davenport is going to recommend. And but this is almost like deja vu for me, not technical, it's deja vu, because this is the fourth rezoning request that not only looks at, and when we talk about density, I know we all want to address affordable housing, but this is the fourth one that, I don't know the word to say, that is complimentary of our seasoned residents have come to us. This is the fourth. And I think Commissioner Link alluded to, this was some of the old stuff and whatever else she said, but it just it's kind of painful. I feel a little bit awkward because, yes, we need affordable housing. Yes, density seems to be the way we get there. But for folk that have invested in this community, that has got this community this far, it seems like we kind of overlook them. And I know that is not part of future land plans, but we got to remember, when we develop a future land plan, when some of us are younger or more in our prime or whatever, folk are going to get older, and they're trying to find, and I think the word someone used was a quality of life. And that is totally not part of our discussions. I don't know about policies against people of color and all of that, but I guarantee you this, whether you're a person of color, white, black, polka dot pink, you're going to get older. You're going to get older if you keep living. And this is the fourth one that we have had seasoned residents come and address their quality of life. And I just want to put that, I appreciate all the technical about the canopies and the trees and all of that. But some of these communities wouldn't even be communities if it wasn't and I just want to put that out there because this is the fourth time. And this was not just with people of color, but these four groups that have come to us have been what I would call seasoned folk. And I would hope that the developer and Patrick and whoever else would talk to folk and try to find a compromise and respect people that have been invested in this community.
Commissioner Hamby?
Thank you, Mayor. And Brad, this may be a stupid question. I don't ask many of those, so I get to ask them every now and then. But, yeah. So why was there an opportunity to connect to the cottages on the other side instead of to the subdivision on that side? Was there not accommodations made for the cottages to have, you see what I'm asking?
I do, and actually, that's not a stupid question at all. It's, the cottages was done as a multifamily development.
Right.
And so there are no public streets within that development. It's no different. Once you enter in off Lexington Road, it's no different than going into an apartment complex from a road.
We don't own those streets.
There were connections that were provided along that, what you see there is that would be the western property line that's adjacent to the cottages. But those connections would have to be done through a private agreement between the developer of the cottages and the developer here, and
is that a possibility?
I don't think it's a possibility, but that would be something that perhaps the developer could address with you when he speaks to you at your voting meeting.
Brad, the way that Woodgrove enters from Lexington, it looks like there's a segment of its, I guess, western neck that's actually not part of this new parcel under consideration. Is that correct? So
yes,
I ask that because
do it again.
Could there be a sidewalk from Lexington down Woodgrove to the point where the property line terminates there at that first joint?
I think from a standpoint of seeing if the developer, as a condition, he's got to build the property along what you see as the frontage. So he's got to take it to this point. I quit. But that last little piece, if he was willing to do that as a condition, maybe. But that's, that would get to the public right of way of where Woodgrove hits Lexington. Mm-hmm. That's not something that under normal plan review requirements that we would have the authority to require him to do if this was a by right development.
But that could be a condition.
I think for something that length, and if it was something he was willing to do, I think you could make that a condition.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, what does the Athens in Motion plan say about bike ped facilities on this segment of Lexington? I mean, there might not be connecting sidewalk or multi-use path there now, but the vision is to have that, and especially being that it's so close to the park. I would like to see a condition that there be multi-use path on the Lexington frontage incorporated, and any kind of set aside to get some more facility, further down on Woodbridge, with the anticipation that one day maybe we'll see GDOT put in a stoplight there with real proper pedestrian crossing facilities, and make this whole section of town pedestrian-friendly, so people in Woodbridge could easily walk to the Walmart and do a little grocery shopping.
Back to me.
Commissioner Davenport again?
Yes, sir, I got some work to do. I do apologize. The applicant did request to come out and speak today, and I figured it was gonna be late. I'm like, and I do apologize for him for not being able to speak. I have just a technical question about the alleyway in the back. And if the applicant could do away with that alleyway, go through the hearings board, is that a possibility, or is that be straight code for fire that that alleyway has to be in existence? Because if you do away with the alleyway, you get rid of more concrete and the asphalt, you can have a much larger buffer of trees, possibly, because you have a green backyard, and turn the front into maybe like make the home more front loading instead of back loading, but driveway.
I mean, I guess if your question is, could he do that? Yes, he could do that. Can he meet the driveway separation requirements? I don't know. And we didn't evaluate it to that extent because it wasn't a binding plan. But you could not condition the hearings board to grant a variance on driveway separation. It would have to stand on its own and be evaluated by that group based on the criteria.
But an RS, the current zoning, that cul-de-sac will still have a connection?
Yes.
Okay.
There's on-street parking available.
There would be on-street parking and sidewalks available on the public street, and then your driveway for your individual houses would be behind them. Under this design.
This is a real new urbanist style design, with having the more pedestrian focus on the actual street frontage.
As shown, but not binding, yes.
Yeah.
Commissioner Houle?
Yeah, I think Brad's last comment there is just an important thing for us to consider. This is not a binding site plan, and some of the conditions put on by the planning commission would definitely require it to be altered a good bit, so maybe we shouldn't get too attached to this design and think more about just what kinds of things theoretically could happen within the parameters set under a straight-up rezone with whatever conditions are put. I guess just the other thing I wanted to share I know like a lot of residents are coming out to speak, and I definitely appreciate their concerns. I'd love to better understand their concerns in the context of this request versus what could happen there under the existing zoning. Because there is essentially, the question before us is whether we want something more dense or less dense on this lot, not whether we want something at all. So that'd be helpful to hear conveyed. That's all.
Commissioner Myers?
I just wanted actually to respond to Commissioner Link's point, and that the Lexington Road sidewalks and multi-use paths, there are projects there from Whit Davis out to Morton Road and Robert Hardeman. So those are included in the plan.
All right. I believe.
I had one.
Yeah, go right ahead, Commissioner Edwards.
Commissioner Hull just kind of made me think about it. I mean, yeah, the question is, more dense or less dense, and the extension of that question is lower cost or higher cost, more affordable or less affordable. Thanks.
Commissioner Denson?
Yeah, just one, I think it is important. I mean, pulling this up on Google Maps, or if you've driven by, this entire area has already been completely clear cut and, correct? That's next to it.
That's the cottages.
The cottages that are being built.
Okay. It's the one between, yeah. Okay, but yeah, I guess my, my concern a little bit about that is that if we're doing just, straight up rezone here, and we are focusing a lot on this binding plan. Non-binding, that's what I'm saying. We're focusing on this as if it is a binding plan. We're talking about this plan a lot when it's not. So I think to Commissioner Hoole's point that it's more, we should just think about what is possible there. I mean, in the past, we have asked for applicants to come back with a binding plan afterwards of this back, and, that's a possibility, right? So, I mean, if we're gonna dig into this thing of putting conditions in and stuff, I think I'd rather go to the point of actually having a binding plan. So,
Which would take another pass through the planning commission.
Yes.
All right, everyone, we have one more item. Is anyone here to speak to the former cooperative extension building on West Broad Street?
No,
That-
no, you're right. I just said I don't think Gavin was coming, so, okay.
All right.
2152 West Broad Street. This is a straight rezoning request. This is the former cooperative extension building that we own the property, currently zoned government. There have been discussions regarding the disposal of this property through sale, or at least the preparation. We have done this historically a couple different ways, and I believe the decision was made with this property that it may be more conducive to go ahead and have you all put appropriate zoning in place on it and then make it available for potential purchase. So that is the process that we're bringing this property through under. You know the property, it's there on West Broad. You see future land use right now identifies this one piece as government future land use. We would change that if approved to general business, which is comparable with everything else along Broad. Change the zoning to commercial general. Planning Commission recommends that this be approved for both changes.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, go for it.
Sell it.
Yep, let's change the zoning and put it on the market.
Anyone else? All right, thanks all. All right, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
moved.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, please sign your affidavit for Gene.